Yakoke, Miigwech, Palamia, and thank you for joining me here today for a special episode of The Bridge. I am your host, Carrie Young, and today's guest is a playful soul. Welcome to The Bridge, Andras Jones.
Thanks for having me, Kira.
So you have this really fun website that I just got to try out on Monday. And the song I was playing before my intro was the song that I had in mind when I asked the question of the 8-ball. And can you give us the address of your site?
Well, my site is radio8ball.com. That's all one word, radio, the number 8ball.com, and it's based on the musical divination format that I started working with in 1998 on a station in Olympia called Chaos. And in the show, we would answer questions by picking CDs at random and playing them on shuffle function. And the song that was randomly chosen was the answer to the question, like picking a musical tarot card. And over the years, I've developed it as a live stage show and now as a web series and also as an online pop oracle, which is what you're referring to, where at radio8ball.com, people are invited to ask a question and consult the pop oracle and receive an answer in the form of a randomly chosen song, one of 78 songs, all that correspond with a tarot card. And most of the songs in this pop oracle are performed by artists who performed on Radio 8 Ball or performed with me in my years as a musician, and then some musicians who we hope to have as guests. A little bit of wishful magic making. Yeah. And so I invited you to check out radio8ball.com, and within minutes, I got an email back from you saying that you asked a question. Mm-hmm. And the question was what?
Was who has a red right hand? And I was thinking of Nick Cave's song.
No, did you ask who has a red right hand or who has the red right hand?
The red right hand. Who has the red right hand? Okay, and there's already one thing that came up during your introduction for me, which I have to point out, was that when I was younger, I worked at a record store called Chaos Records in Philadelphia. Oh. So, yeah. Okay, so the red right hand...
it's one of the perks and or, sort of dangerous side effects of all the synchronicity work that I have increased the sync web around me, and it's pretty much everyone I interact with, we have some level of wow kind of synchronicity. So that was like the first tiny raindrops of whatever this conversation is going to yield.
Yeah.
Storm-wise.
So I'm thinking,
and you asked a pretty, it's a pretty intense question because I did a little research on the phrase "red right hand," and it refers to the vengeful hand of God, and it's a reference to a poem. I'm sorry, I'm actually re-looking it up because it's actually from John Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost, and it refers to the vengeful hand of God. Whether or not that was your intent, and if you're just referring to Nick Cave, even the song itself is definitely taking on the darker issues.
But what he turns it
feels, into... Nick Cave doesn't really write light songs at all, does he?
Right. He writes stories. He's a storyteller. Like a country singer is a storyteller. But what he turned that character into, and he was definitely referring to Paradise Lost, I'm sure he was, because that's how he writes, but he turned it into a sort of a trickster character. So, but what I got from the Radio 8 Ball site as far as the tarot, was the Knight of Cups. So
the Knight of Cups, which corresponds, and I don't know if you're going to play this, if we're going to play this song now so people can hear the answer.
Yeah, we'll play the song.
Yeah, the Knight of Cups, which refers to a song by an artist who I have managed for years and who has been kind enough to host the last 2 episodes of the Radio 8 Ball Show. A really interesting songwriter named Andy Shmushkin. And are we going to tell what the answer you got was now?
Yes. Yeah, the answer was Andy Shmushkin's song, Christmas Cunnilingus, which I absolutely loved. It's a brilliant song.
It's a classic.
So, let's play it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
It's been a hard year, people. Not everyone can afford to go out and buy presents from the same corporations that just picked us out of our savings and pension funds. But hey, that's no excuse to not treat your girlfriend right around the holidays. That's why I'm going to be giving Christmas cunnilingus. I hear you laughing, people, but you don't need no credit card, no swinging dick that's always hard. You just need to tend her yard. Tender Christmas cunnilingus. Christmas cunnilingus. Old Scrooge was stingy with his tongue. George Bailey's wife could never come. Santa Claus just used his thumb. Give her some Christmas cunnilingus. Christmas cunnilingus. Christmas cunnilingus. Christmas cunnilingus. If belly buttons were mistletoe, you'd figure out where your kiss will go this year before you mount. Give her the gift that counts. Give her some Christmas cunnilingus. Christmas cunnilingus. Yeah, do like the Messiah would. Make your girlfriend feel good. You should limber up your jaw before desire starts to thaw. I don't want to see you hesitate. Don't make the poor girl masturbate. To paraphrase what Jesus said, give her head. I'm talking about some Christian cunnilingus. Calisthenics now. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. And la 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 la.
I love it. I love that song. And it's a great earwig, too, that you can, have in your mind all day long. So I heard that, and I was like, oh, my God,
I love
it.
That, you got the song stuck in your head?
Oh, yeah. So I'm like at work, just, Christmas cunnilingus, and my coworkers are like, what? And I said, oh, just getting in the Christmas spirit, just, getting into it. And then I come home, and I'm in the kitchen, I'm doing dishes. Christmas cunnilingus. My husband says, what? I said, you heard me. Getting in the Christmas spirit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, that means Shmushkin's work is, I won't say it's done, but he's achieved his goal. Is to have women take this song on as the song of empowerment and liberation, and and that's why it's associated with the Knight of Cups. The Knight of Cups is really about honoring the divine feminine in the most, heroic and powerful and loving way possible. And, what's more knightly than what is a greater service to the divine feminine than to worship the woman who's embodying her?
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
It's not the only way to worship, to honor and worship the divine feminine, but it is certainly, in my experience, it's usually appreciated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was looking around.
Or not.
The Knight of Cups, and, different people's take on the Knight of Cups. And, so I checked out, Thomas Sheridan's, he has videos on different tarot cards that he's randomly picked. And his interpretation was like the Knight of Cups is like a rolling stone, very creative but gets bored easily, And then the negative side really synced with the Nick Cave song, which is the bringer of false hopes, a phony or a fake. But that's certainly not what I get out of the song. But there's several sides to that card.
Well, you could read it that way. I suppose if the implication was that it was really a ritual only for Christmas,
right?
Then you could you could see it as a trickster. Like that would be that seems like it could be a trickster pulling kind of move. So you could see that, and Shmushkin definitely embodies a trickster archetype. Mm-hmm. So, in terms of the right hand, as far as the vengeful hand of God, right. I feel like in a lot of ways, what I tried to do in creating this pop oracle was a lot of the songs are kind of contradictions to the archetypes as much as they are pure expressions of them. So, so you could see how the Knight of Cups, first of all, the idea of this song representing the Knight of Cups could be seen by some people as, irreverent or just trying to be silly or, just trying to be dirty. I appreciate that you take it how it's intended as Shmushkin says as one of his promos, as a paean to the goddess. So, as far as I think of Shmushkin in a way as the antidote for that vengeful father god that sits at the heart of the Abrahamic religions. Mm-hmm. So, in that sense, who has the red right hand? Well, maybe I'm not much of a God talker, but if you're going to talk about the vengeful hand of God, maybe God doesn't really have a vengeful hand. Maybe he has a loving hand as well as a generous mouth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Certainly another way to look at it. Certainly potentially a more positive way to look at it than, I don't think any of us, I don't know about you, but I've listened to one of your podcasts, and you don't seem to be someone who has a particular axe to grind. You seem to be, I haven't got the vengeful from you yet.
Right. Yeah.
So the other thing is when you ask a question to the Pop Oracle, first of all, your answer is one it's going to be very personal to you, and you're going to understand over time. And on the other hand, once you ask the question, it sort of becomes everyone's question. This is one of the things that I learned from my father's dream seminars in a very strange way, from someone who had attended them and called up my show and asked if I was open to making a few changes based upon some dream work she'd done. And then in the course of the conversation, we realized that she was talking about my father's dream seminars. But she had suggested that the way in the dream seminars, what people would say when they interpreted the dream was, if this was my dream, the one you're reading, that's your dream, if this was my dream, this is what it would mean for me.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not I always say that when interpreting Radio 8 Ball or the musical divinations we do, that's always the idea, that no one can interpret for each other. But by being honest and taking on your question, like what does that question mean for me? Even the asking of it, the red right hand. I was talking with Alan Green, and he was talking about how it's interesting that the reason that you and I connected was because of episode 7 of Synchronize, which is about which is called A Spider in His Hand, and it's all about red ice. So then you have this red hand encoded into the show that led to us, like you inviting me to be on your show.
That is interesting.
There's multiple layers of sync going on at all times. That's really the game of us sync heads. We sync heads, we crazy sync heads, is really tapping into that place where, it's all sync all the time, and at the same time, you gotta still remember your zip code and be able to tell the difference between your fanciful interpretation of the way things might be and falling into the trap of thinking that the weird reflection you see is actually true. Because in the game of sync, in the game of everything, it's kind of all projection, and I've had people tell me that's a cop-out, but definitely in the game of sync, it's all projection. We're all seeing, you learn quickly is that you only see a reflection of yourself in the synchronicities that appear to you, or that appear to one. And then we can choose to project, which we have to sort of parse out when we're projecting our shadow and when we're projecting our higher self onto the situation. And without a judgment on either. Some situations call for our shadow. Some situations call for our higher self. So, a lot of healing situations actually require shadow work. So there's nothing, that's another part of sync work, is getting that there are no bad cards in the deck. There's no wrong synchronicities. There are some that hurt or that are less pleasant than others, but it's not like the futility card in the deck is any worse than the love card in the deck.
It's all,
you need them all in the deck. And the idea that, that's, I think, going back to the red right hand, the vengeful god, what's that vengeful card doing but casting cards out of the deck, which is just dumb, because then you don't have a complete deck. So, this conversation isn't much of a conversation, just being a great listener.
Which I'm normally, I really try to be a good listener, but I interject myself a lot. And what I was thinking when you were talking about how, in the sync game, it's all a projection of yourself. I was thinking about the conversation that I had with Thomas Sheridan and Niall Murphy about psychedelics being the same thing, is that you're exploring your own psyche, and on the shamanic end of it, you casting out your own demons and bringing forth your own gods or goddesses or divinity within.
And I should say, I never want to be the one who says that it's just projection or it's all projection, because another piece of the synchronicity game is that what it really, if it's always anything, it's always paradox. So, which means that it's never paradox. It's that it, especially when you try and express it in language. The only way to really get at synchronicity in language is through paradox, because it's not, a synchronicity never just means one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It means one thing on the experiential, on the physical level. When you experience a synchronicity and you get a chill down your spine, it's just a chill down your spine.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get a synchronicity and you gain an insight into a situation that you didn't have insight to before, well, it's just an insight into something you didn't have insight to before. But then you put the two together, that physical response and the insight, and now we're playing, now there's like, the synchronicity is playing you like an instrument a little bit,
mm-hmm.
creating paradox. Yeah, it's just a shiver down your spine, and it's just an insight, if you want to say just, because it's simply that. But then together there's more, and you could sort of go through sort of the different levels of consciousness and say, well, this is how a synchronicity shows up there, and it's just that on that level. And on one of those levels, on the level where we're all connected, when a synchronicity
mm-hmm.
happens, it's a sign of, it's sort of some strange kind of proof of that.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking.
And that's all it is.
That's exactly what I was thinking when you said it. It's a sign of how everything is connected, all life. And, how when we hook into something creative, or this creative part of ourselves, we're hooking into that, the reality of that interconnection. And, so sometimes, that creativity can lead to just, knowing, just knowing that it's meaningful. And maybe the goosebumps or the, chill is part of the physical body's way of letting you know, or perceive it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then beyond that, there are really interesting conversations to be had that could be fanciful. It's one of the things, like, I talk about in my book, Accidental Initiations from Sync Book Press, which I encourage people to check out all the stuff from Sync Book Press. In that book, I suggest my fanciful notion that synchronicity could be a potential energy source. Now, am I going to claim that there's any backing for that idea at all? None whatsoever. It's pure poetic hopefulness, and based upon some level of thinking that first of all is an experience of synchronicity that says this phenomenon has power to it. For what it definitely has expressed power in my own personal life, and I think a lot of people have experienced that in their own personal lives. And then there's the whole idea that that connection of the present moment to a context that's given by time. Like a lot of synchronicity is about two things happening that seem independent of each other and yet align with such harmony that it gives you a sense of there being some personal importance to this. Right. And that's given by the context that's given by time, which physics tells us doesn't really exist. So maybe there's something about synchronicity and time travel. I don't know, again, totally fanciful idea, and one of the things that a lot of us it's a conversation that comes up a lot in the realm of Sync Book and the people who gravitate to it, is that we get to just have fun with these ideas and not get too attached to any of them as being true or not true. In the way that maybe like science fiction writers write. Like, maybe it's true. Let's examine how it would be if it were true and look for the evidence of it. And the fun thing with synchronicity is if you look for it, you'll find it.
Mm-hmm. So you're creating it, really, when you go look. To
a certain degree, we're all, and this, as a a lot of times it gets referred to as sloppy chaos magic. I refer to it as sloppy chaos magic. I think actually that's Alan Green's phrase. Mm-hmm. And it is what we're doing. We're, if this were a movie and it was the kind of movie that I used to act in, definitely bodies would start dropping at some point.
Mm-hmm.
When foolish, creative, spoiled Americans start tampering with the dark and deep realities of the energetic world, it rarely goes well for them in the movies.
Right. This is true.
Luckily, and this is one of those cases where it's lucky that life isn't a movie. I think
right.
Life might not be going well for any of us, but it's not because of our synchronicity work.
And isn't it a balance of power or connection that there are these accidental initiations, in our world where rites of passage are missing, frequently missing from the timeline of our lives, But yet there's these accidental ones or these intuitive ones that happen anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to, I definitely have had times, and I do have times when I mourn the fact that I don't live in a time and a place where we have powerful traditions and initiation rituals and elders. And at the same time, I wonder if I was in a situation where life was, where you had that, but life was really codified, and there was one way to adulthood, one way through life. And that maybe I'd be the person, the weirdo who left that scene, because I'm like, there's got to be other ways than just our rituals and just our practices to get to the top of that mountain. And I'm going to go find my own, because synchronicity is telling me that I'm going to follow, you guys follow the bear, I'm going to follow the butterfly. Woo, whatever.
Or you could be the Heyoka.
It's an easy trap to fall into, I feel like, to think that there's another sacred way that's better. Because clearly, there is, but from the sync, maybe this is given to me by sync, or maybe it's just given to me by the balanced diet of cults and the way that I've come up in the world, and being an American who has had internet for a lot of his life, that it's easy to hate on your own time, and we live in such a weird and magical time. I think you could go back to almost any time, and if you could say, you could have the world at your fingertips, you're going to have to lose out on these things, but, I think a lot of people would at least want to try it, and then they get here and spend enough time to realize this is hell and a nightmare and wish they could go back, but grass is always greener, even when there's no grass. So, and don't get me wrong, I can hate on the present state of affairs as much as anyone, but I guess when I'm on the podcast with someone, I feel obligated to try and get to a more universal place in my speaking. And from a universal level, aside from my own whining aside, we live in some pretty magical times with a lot of opportunities to live very fully in very small spaces. So
I don't disagree with that. But I think, and actually one of the things that I find so beautiful about Native thought and tradition, and is that seemingly opposing simultaneous realities are a part of reality. And so, when I'm with other natives, it's not unusual that one person's reality seems to negate mine, but doesn't. So I don't know how else to put that. See, it's kind of like we're both right, because the indigenous mode of being. I'm not saying that it's better, but I'm saying that, in this timeless reality, we have an indigenous self, because we live in a world that's been conquered at different times throughout history. So we all have the experience of having been conquered, and we all have the experience within us of not being conquered. And so I would encourage anyone to take what route they need to get to that place in themselves, in their own sort of cellular memory or ancestral memory, if that makes any sense. So to appreciate who you are, that's a healthy thing too. And when you were saying you might be the person who would sort of go off and do things differently, that's a part of whole traditions too. Just like the Knight of Cups, right? The Wanderer,
right.
And the Trickster, and all these, different spirits. In the Lakota tradition, the Heoka, or the contrary, is needed. The person who does things the opposite of everyone else to balance the whole community. And so that's a wholeness in itself too, a recognition of the need for that. We might, even though we might not find it expressed in a way that we understand. Once we start, like you said, with the Sphinx, once we start looking for it, you're going to find it. Like when I was a kid and I knew there was something wrong with the way things work in the world, and I started looking for other weirdos that thought the same thing. And that's, been the trajectory of life, is looking for the other weirdos that think that, see the glitch in the matrix or something off. Not quite right.
Yeah. So what else do you want to talk about?
Well, I think I would like to talk...
there's so much... Oh, go on.
I think I want to talk a little bit more about... I want to go back to this, the concept of the red right hand and delve a little bit deeper into that. And as opposed to, as opposed to the Knight of Cups. Because what I put together during this first part of our conversation, while I was thinking about what you were saying, is that the red right hand of God, or sort of this authoritarian concept of divinity, as opposed to the non-authoritarian concept of divinity, or the creative divine that's within us all. Is that more indigenous way of looking, for all people of the world? The indigenous way of looking at divinity is from this creative, that creator and creative are one. And so there's no separation between that which has been created and what created it. It's all one. It's divinity within creation. So I want to talk about that.
Yeah, like the top of the tree of life.
Right.
I talk about it in my book, which is about how there's a Kabbalistic tree of life built into the city of Olympia and the architecture of it by the Freemasons who built the town. And I take people through the Kabbalistic tree on the ground and also conceptually. And the upper three Sephirot, which are Bina, Chokhmah, and Keter, are their creation and wisdom and understanding. But they all are one. The way I describe it is they're a simultaneity, and I describe it like a finger snap. It's like the idea to snap the fingers, the snapping of the fingers, and then the hearing of the snap all happen at once. But in order to talk about them, in order to understand them, we can take that apart. And in a way, like, I think maybe that's what you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
the creation, the creating, and what do you say?
The creator.
And the creator are the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
and yet, in order to understand them, like the contradictory ideas we're talking about,
mm-hmm.
we have language, and language demands that things mean things. So then you have to have different things which mean things that you can put next to each other and say, yes, but it may seem like they are in opposition, but they are actually in concert.
Exactly. You got it. You got it. So
I mean, and then along that line, we're talking about, the red right hand sound, like, especially in the context of Shmushkin's song, sounds a lot to me like a midwife.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
the catcher.
I mean, Shmushkin and the Knight of Cups are honoring the divine feminine in card form and in music form. But maybe the red right hand isn't about the one who is worshiping, but that which is being worshipped.
Mm. Yeah. So the goddess that came before.
And,
the god.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the god, and the women who are, like, well, this is the other thing I always think about a lot about with Nick Cave's music. It's funny you said country and western. I don't really think of him as being a country and western singer, but I do think of him as being like a cowboy singer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a subtle difference, but there's this sense of, like, it's country and western is like a guy in a bar drinking a beer. Cowboy music is someone out of a movie. It's the guy walking in, it's the gunfighter. Mm-hmm. It's this archetypal hero, anti-hero,
mm-hmm.
who, every move is this, it's like an Ennio Morricone, it's like not Ennio Morricone. Why am I forgetting this? Sergio Leone. It's all like a Sergio Leone film.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this, and I think a lot of times I wrote a screenplay called Band of Whores, which was about trying to write a cowboy film for women, like who is what's the feminine equivalent of the gunslinger. Mm-hmm. And I figured, the prostitute is mm-hmm. like that. In that she's like the gunslinger, she helps build the Old West, but once it gets civilized, she has to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And but to be honest, of course I would say that because I'm a sexist dude, probably, because the truth is that the real woman gunslinger would be the midwife.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one who has the dangerous wisdom that helps build the town, and then, in the story she gets kicked out by quote, civilization.
Mm-hmm. Nurturing new life.
The male doctors.
Yeah. Nurturing new life in the face of so, much, harsh conditions and so much death. That is the archetype of the woman warrior for me, is the mother who says no, the mama bear, who says no, I'm going to nurture this new life in the face of the hell and death around me, because that's my job.
So is she saying no, or is she saying yes?
Yeah, she's saying no to death and yes to life. because you always have a choice, really. I mean, even when you're dying. Or even when you're facing death.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what giving birth is. It's facing death. Quite literally.
Well, now you're into some territory that I haven't given birth, so I can't really say.
Yeah.
I have to, that's one of those areas where, like the Knight of Cups or Shmushkin, I just have to say,
you're probably right.
Yes to the mother, yes to the mother. She, there's stuff that she knows, there's wisdom that she has that I will never grasp. And you can find other cards in the deck, I think, where it goes the other way, and I think that's one of the pieces that I hope we're moving towards in my lifetime is beyond the dialectic to a place of really, again, moving in concert. I mean, what's a better example of two contradictory ideas living together than two people?
Right.
Let alone two people of different biological genders that have, the different body chemistries that go with those bodies. That's a practice in contradiction that most people go in for. And, and then without that, and so there again, it's like the Lover's card or alchemy, the alchemy that's implied by the Lover's card. It's all there in these fabulous contradictions. Vive la difference.
And it creates something new, bringing those two forces together. Those two contradictory forces. So, yeah, wow.
But again, that's a topic that I can only speak about the child making business from the standpoint of one who has been made. So.
Yeah.
So I can't claim to be any kind of expert in that terrain. I just know that, oh boy, if I was my kid, I probably wouldn't want. I wouldn't want to have kids. I'm not that bad. I mean, probably every Jewish son thinks they're the worst son in the world. So, what else you got for me? What other questions you got for me?
So, what do you have ahead? What are you working towards? What's coming up?
Well, we just released the Radio 8 Ball website. So right now it's getting people aware of that. There's 3 best of podcasts from the radio show's history. There's the new TV episode. I'm going to be locking in a venue and a headliner for the next one. And then I'm going to start a Patreon campaign to raise the funds to do that, and also, maybe find some sponsors for that. And probably that will be the main focus once we settle on, and it'll be right now, it is finding that venue, putting together the artist, getting ready, because Radio 8 Ball always has a musical guest and a celebrity guest who Skypes in. So,
oh, cool.
We've had, as celebrity guests, we've had John C. Reilly and Seth Green and Weird Al Yankovic and Patricia Arquette and Ray Don Chong and a lot of other great people and excellent musicians, some sort of regional talents, and some people who are maybe more national people might be more aware of, like Dan Byrne or Ricky Lee Jones or John Auer of the Posies. Mira, Anya Marina, other artists like that. And, and then our own, homegrown like Shmushkin. But so every show involves finding an artist who wants to commit to this kind of a show and a celebrity who's willing to ask the final question. And so I'm pulling that together, and then once we do that, then we'll film it and record it and put it out as the next episode. You know, in the meantime, there's a lot. I'll be working on podcasts with SyncBook and running my Kabbalistic Tree of Life in Olympia, and probably getting into all kinds of controversies. It seems like I can't go. I really see at this point, just like synchronicities are surround me. Part of that, and part of accepting that there are no bad cards in the deck, is that whatever it is, my path has led to many conflicts and controversies that seem very much beyond my control, unless I'm really running an insane racket on myself, so that I'm actually this dastardly person, when my experiences of sort of saying, hey, can't we just figure this out? There's something here. Why don't we look? And then, all of a sudden the villagers are up in arms, and they're,
Would you call yourself...
And I'm hiding back in my apartment, hanging out with the sync crowd, because, they're the only ones crazy enough not to get hung up on their ideas that whatever contradiction I provide doesn't, set people into a tizzy. And even in the realm of sync, I still manage to get into one nonsense conflict every, 6 months at least.
Would you call yourself a cycle breaker?
A what?
A cycle breaker.
A cycle breaker. I don't know. I don't know, because I do feel like a very cyclical person as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess maybe I really think that it's that part of synchronicity work, and the way I've worked with it, I come to this as an actor. And so for me, a big part of sync work is about embodying synchronicity rather than capturing it, rather than pointing them out, embodying it. And a big part of that, and I'm not saying that that's the key to it, because even before I took that on consciously, I still had that quality about me. But the decision I've come to, and maybe self-serving, is that I'm just maybe more projective or reflective than other people who don't rile people up as much. And I think that a lot of people see themselves in me, and in a lot of experience, I've had a lot of experience of people who I work with or have collaborated with to some degree, even people I've gone out with, I guess. But mostly, I mean, that was actually my love life has been generally, even though there's been drama there, not nearly on the scale that my professional life has brought me. So in that way, I'm pretty lucky. But that something, people see their reflection, or I was going to say people who I work with they see their reflection at first in me as like this wonderful, wonderful thing, and then at some point they realize that there's a person behind that reflection, and it's rather disappointing compared to their initial projection of their own divine onto this other person. And then, when people are disappointed in you, a lot of times the reaction is, their reaction isn't necessarily to take responsibility for having had unreal expectations, but to feel betrayed and then to lash out the way people who feel betrayed often do. I'm sure if I don't know how many people listen to your show, but I'm sure if any of the situations I'm talking about, the people that will listen to this, they'd be like, yeah, I mean, they wouldn't agree. They'd say,
I completely
no, there's a good reason. There's a reason I have a problem with this guy, and this is what it is. Everyone has good reasons. I don't believe that there are just irrational villains running around trying to make mischief for people who are not messing with them in some way. And yet, it certainly is my experience.
99% of the time, yes.
That
yes.
That, you know, there are mischief makers. In my book, I call them the boring haters.
Mm-hmm.
People who aren't being creative in their own lives, aren't doing something, are not satisfied on some level with what they're doing, and then rather than create something or support something that someone else is doing, they get their creative excitement from trashing something that somebody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I believe it's called the internet.
Yeah. Before that, it was the powwow scene, so I've been there.
Right.
You know,
or,
I'm like the white lady on
the
the drum.
Just small town gossip.
What is that white lady doing on that drum? So, yeah. Yep. You know, get on the drum, sing better than me. That's what I say.
Yeah.
Have the courage
So
I
don't know what particulars. Oh, go on. Sorry.
I was just saying, you know, have the courage to get on the drum yourself and sing better than me instead of hating me for having the courage to use the voice that I lost and gained again. You know, I lost my voice, you know, and I had the courage to take it back. So, people hate that even more because you're supposed to stay down once you're, you know, kicked. Once you've had your teeth kicked in, so to speak, you're supposed to stay down. But you get back up and start thriving. Oh, that really gets them. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, well, like I say, I've recently taken the attitude of just someone who, like, I live in Olympia, Washington, and I know people who live in Olympia and complain about the rain.
Move.
It's, you know, exactly, and there was a time before cars and trains and airplanes and everything where moving wasn't really, moving away from the weather where you lived was really, you know, it was an option, but it was a risk in a lot of respects. And I think of my particular knack for conflict as being sort of like that. I'm learning to accept that about myself and not ask why, certainly to try and do it with more grace, with more humility, with more, I don't know, just self-care, less self-hating, and more dealing with what needs to be dealt with. And if that means there's a conflict, then that means there's a conflict. I actually have a couple brewing after I get off this podcast. That's why my mind is on that. And I'm also very much aware that, and we're not going to go into it, but that what inspired this conversation was another one of my conflicts. I shouldn't say that it was my conflict. It was a conflict that was big that I stepped into, and for some reason when I stepped into it, it all jumped on me.
Right.
And that, again, is, you know, that experience was maybe a waking point for me, where I had to realize that's just the dynamic, and that's my role to play. And if I weren't playing it, I might envy it. But since I am playing it, I would say if I could speak to my, you know, I would say that I hope that I've worked this one out on the wheel of karma. I don't got to do this one again.
It's a tall order. But I connected with you because I really related to you in that position that you were in, having to defend your humanity, because I've been there before. And, you know, sometimes we're put in that position because the people who put us there intend to put us there. That is their aim and their goal. And sometimes we end up there by accident. And sometimes, often, it is a mixture of both because of all the dynamics that play that go into creating that situation. But yeah, I very much.
And I want to be. I know we're being delicate about this, and what I'm hoping is that when we put this podcast out, that we can include links to the Sync Book, the Synchronize episode 7 from Sync Book Radio, and to the video that I recently posted of my piece from that called "We're All a Bunch of Jews." And the links that are, and then from there, the other links that, if people are interested in what we're talking about. I hate when I'm listening to a podcast and people, and some of us at SyncBook Radio are guilty of it too, of like getting into a conversation where you're referencing something you're not talking about.
Right.
And then having all these really interesting insights to share about it, but the listener is left saying, huh? Why won't they just say, who punched who in the face?
What were they talking about?
In this case, nobody punched anyone in the face. But it's the Sync Book Radio. I mean, Sync Book, there was a whole, you've probably talked about it on your show. Red Ice was a lot of the Sync Book authors, myself included, have been featured on Red Ice programming. And then over the last year, they really took a strong turn in favor of the Nazis and really opposed Jews in some very overt ways that disturbed a lot of people. And we took it on in this episode, Synchronize episode 7, Spider in the Hand. And when I say we, I mean myself and Alan Green, the main editor over at Sync Book Press and Sync Book Radio. And what came out of that was that, and I guess this part I will claim, just so we can fill people in, I'm a Jewish person. There was a lot of mumbling and people having problems with it, but the moment that I posted about it, it became an argument. It became a very direct argument with me as the person arguing the side, saying, yeah, Nazis and hating Jews is just not okay, and it's not accurate. These are the ways that it's not okay, and at the second I engaged it, even though a lot of people agreed with me, it seemed like I was the focus for a lot of the people who were in favor, who were opposed to Jews for one reason or another. And some of them had political problems with Israel, and some of them just thought that the Jews were in control of the world and eating Christian babies, and the whole, across the board. And I have to say that your invitation to be on your show at a time when I felt like there were a lot of people who just wished I would shut up, which was a main thing that people kept saying, was like 3 posts into it, people are like, oh, this is too negative. What you're talking about is too negative. Why are you going here? And this is in a forum where we talk about the JFK assassination and 9/11 on a regular basis, but somehow pointing out the Nazis in our own group was way too negative. You got to shut up. And I just really appreciate that rather than do that, you said, hey, I'm doing the opposite of telling you to shut up. I'm saying come to my show and we can talk about this.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It needs to be
the fact that you reached out at that point, I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, you're welcome. I'm glad that I could. And it does need to be talked about, and it is disturbing. Because I think that at the heart of it, and I've gone onto Red Ice Facebook page and just been completely surrounded and attacked by neo-Nazis. In a second. They're just on you and they're just like, you're anti-white. I'm like, have you seen my picture? I'm very pale. And it's just, there's something going on there that needs a light shined on it. What is it? What is it all about? I want to know. What's it all about? And I think that for, some people, at the heart of it is, hey, Europeans have been programmed to hate themselves and believe that, that Europeans are the source of we're coming right back to what we were talking about before. One way is good, the other way is bad. You know, the us and them thing. So, when it comes to colonization, so there's this belief that it's Europeans that have colonized the world. Well, yeah, we can look at it that way. But indigenous Europeans were colonized thousands of years ago. So, and it's continued. And so it's really some other type of force. In my mind, it's some other type of force besides something that's connected to race. And race, I don't even believe in race. I think that it's something that's made up. I think that really there's too many anomalies as far as genetics go and trying to prove that there's these different races and, there's these other peoples that don't make sense. They have, in the history of the world, we've all traveled and, had children in places that we've traveled to. So we've all mixed and, intermarried and for thousands of years. So the whole relating to the color of your skin thing, I think it really throws humanity off because we really should be relating to our culture. We really should be relating to our languages and the creative things about us that give to the world. And I've been disturbed for a long time about seeing Europeans start relating to even the term white, which has been imported from America, and so to identify as that, you're identifying, by what you're not.
See, I wouldn't go so far. I think race, like any of these other concepts that are given to us by language, again, it means something and it doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
On some level, like, your hair color doesn't mean anything, except on some level it does.
Mm-hmm.
It means it makes a difference. If you woke up and you looked in the mirror and you all of a sudden had a different hair color, it wouldn't change who you were as a person, but it would be a significant change in who you were as a person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 5'7". If I woke up one day and I was 6'7", it wouldn't change my humanity. It wouldn't make me a better person or a worse person. It would make me a different person. And these are the things that, it's funny, language is my thing. I love it. I dance with it. It's what turns me on. And I believe that language is inherently evil. And I also think that the concept of language being evil is a concept that can only be given to us by language.
Wow.
So so anything that we say, anything that we try and that we think is true, and we take what's in language and try and translate it to reality, is going to leave someone or something out, unless it's really, really great poetry. Great poetry can somehow transcend the evil of language and express paradox in a way that truly is creative, in the sense that it creates a space where, oh my God, this contradiction I feel in myself is now expressed in language, and now I get it. Now, oh, beautiful, how wonderful that that's happened.
And then other people get it.
But in general, most of our language, serves to keep us, just like race, it serves to keep us separated. Right. Saying that this is that, and that is this, and this is not that, and that is not this. And in truth, that's never, like in reality, that's almost never the case, that anything is not something. Especially its opposite. No, but that'll drive you crazy, and I think we live in the insanity of language.
Mm-hmm.
And bringing it back to the realm of sync, that's what I think the crazy folk of the sync movement, if you will, are trying to use what we have at our disposal as language and popular culture to get at these deeper, more universal paradoxes that are often expressed in, ancient archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole other story that really, there are plenty of people who can talk archetypes with you better than me. I can embody them, but I don't always know what they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I might be a little better at embodying them as well. But one of the things that I, in looking at archetypes just in my own life, I remember when I figured out that people react to some sort of archetype that I carry with me or that I embody in some way, rather than me. And that's been the real big paradox in my life, is that people react to this sort of warrior queen archetype or something, because I'm 6'1", I'm very imposing, and so people have feared me throughout my life, and I'm such a gentle soul as well, and that's embodied in my voice. And so it just occurred to me that this radio thing is a way of spreading that part of my medicine, that's the gentle soul, because I have to go through life with people responding to the archetype of the fearsome warrior queen. When that's not all that I am.
That's really funny. That's funny, because I would not have, not that I would have guessed. I was sitting here thinking of your height, but as soon as you painted yourself that way,
mm-hmm.
I'll even before you said it, there was a part of me that was saying, I'm a little bit intimidated by her now.
Wow. Isn't that something?
Because I'm a tiny little man. I'm only 5'7". You could crush me.
See, that's the thing. But
I'm sorry. I'm totally playing into the stereotype that has oppressed you because you're right.
I mean, but I can joke with it because, I'm 45, so I've dealt with it. I've played with it myself, but I also know that it's not me.
As soon as I said I was 5'7", you had to point out that you were 6'1". That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting.
You're like, you think you're 5'7", Mr. 5'7". Look over here. So maybe let's look at that.
Maybe there is.
Hey, I don't mind. I don't mind being psychologically topped by a woman. Again, Jewish mother. I got that one down.
You're used to that strong.
Yeah, and I live in Olympia, the home of Riot Girl. I was raised by Olympia. I was raised and lowered by Olympia.
Right.
In a lot of ways, my book is devoted to the spirit of Olympia, and I do believe it's a divine feminine spirit.
It sounds like it.
Which doesn't necessarily mean that divine feminine spirit is the province merely of the women of Olympia, but that it is the province of all people.
Right.
That divine feminine that the Knight of Cups is worshiping, is offering his services to. He's offering his services to the divine feminine, to the universal feminine, which gives life to all, men, women, children, trees, plants, and critters.
Everything.
Right.
The all-encompassing. That's what's so fearsome, too, about the goddess, is that she encompasses everything. All life. The giver of all life. So would not that naturally make those who are in juxtaposition in whatever physical form they take feel small? Or
how do you mean?
Well, the goddess is all-encompassing. The juxtaposition of the goddess being all-encompassing, life-giver. And you said earlier how you only know that as something that's been given life, as someone who's been created.
Yeah, we find the divine feminine. I think this. So I'm going to keep referring to my book. I encourage people to read it, but by the time we're done with this conversation, it might be pointless. I've given away all the good stuff. I hope not. But a big part of the book is about the inner marriage, is about the divine feminine and the divine masculine that lives inside of each of us. And that is, that's the real game.
Right.
And I think we play that out in the dance of romance when we're immature or figuring it out, or when we live in a society that doesn't teach us about the divine anything. Just the almighty dollar. Right. So there's the almighty, but not necessarily the divine. But I feel lucky enough to have lost enough of everything, including a lot of the things that were holding a lot of the patriarchal, depressive patriarchal structures in my own mind that I was keeping my own self down with, to unlock these other parts of my self, my consciousnesses, to let my divine masculine and my divine feminine meet and create something inside of me that has been more rewarding than most relationships, and has also made me more available to actually relate to other people from a standpoint of wholeness rather than a standpoint of looking for my other piece.
Yeah.
So where were we talking about? How do we get to the inner marriage?
Well, I'll bring it back to what you said before about...
Thank you.
You said that you only know reality as being the created. And what I was thinking when you said that was that, but you have within you the creator, because you're part of the creator, because you're creation, and creator and created are one. And that's the divine marriage. I mean, that's what it is.
Right.
No separation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it allows it. So maybe, I guess where I was going was that there is something that relating with someone else who holds the other charge in the binary, like whatever, the negative to your positive charge or positive to your negative charge, that we learn about the movement of those energies. But ultimately, until we can marry those in ourselves, we can't really genuinely relate to somebody else without it being some level of a kind of addiction that leads to the kind of projection that I was talking about, that I've encountered a lot. Not as much in the romantic realm as in the professional realm. But that sense that you are the solution or you are the problem, or you are the solution, and if you're not the solution, then you're the problem. As opposed to I am the solution and I am the problem and you are you.
Right.
And now let's figure out what that is, because I don't need you to solve my problem, and I don't need you to be my problem. Then you get to be, it's like the answer in a radio 8-ball. Like, I get to, if I'm not expecting you to solve or be the problem, then I can just be open to the random synchronicity that's about to come out of your mouth. I don't have to take it personally, and at the same time, I get to take it personally.
Right. That's its teacher, taking it personally. You have to let that teach you first before you can let go of it and not take it personally. Before you can get there. And it's all okay, it's all part of the process.
Indeed. Although what that process is, very few of us know. Do you know?
No, I'm just sort of skating along here, figuring it out as I go.
I'm just psyched to have someone to talk to about it for a couple hours, because when this is up, I go back to my life and have to deal with the nitty-gritty of the way things are, regardless of, like, the magic of synchronicity is amazing, and at the same time, I still got to prepare for winter.
Right.
It's an energy source, but it's not necessarily the energy source that's going to heat my apartment.
Right.
I think that's why synchronicity in a way makes artists of us all.
Mm-hmm.
And those of us who are already, aligned with that path, then maybe it makes us better or, more inspired artists. But I feel like anyone who plays with synchronicity is stepping into and it's actually one of the most interesting creative realms, because I think it's being creative with listening, which is a very, wonderfully yin form of creativity.
It is, and the magic that happens when someone is listened to, because of the culture that we live in, it's all, it's all noise with no receiver. It's all noise with no receiver. And so I do that sometimes at work. When I talk to people at work, I work in emergency management at the federal level. I'll just put it that way. And so when there's a big disaster, I talk to people and they tell me their near-death experiences, and they have a lot of frustration and at having to deal with the bureaucracy that they're having to deal with in order to get the help that they need. And I found that just actually listening to what they say without responding in any type of personal way is like its own healing. Because I know what they're talking about. I know where they're coming from, and it's not about me. And that's a healing all of its own. That's a magic that I'm fortunate to have been able to learn myself. It's magic. It does things. It's its own force. And it seems like a good one.
Oh, yes. Powerful listening has been I don't want to say it's a practice. It is a constant learning for me. I am a natural extrovert, as you may have gathered from our conversation. I'm someone who likes to talk, who enjoys thinking while talking. I have found that is really great, a really great skill to have as a writer, to be able to think while writing is like thinking while talking, and then magical stuff comes out that you wouldn't have figured out if you had thought before you spoke, which might also be why what leads me to some of my controversies and conflicts. But that's me. And at the same time, I realize more and more that the space where I can do the most powerful magic is when I just when I allow someone else to speak, when I allow something, when I allow nature when I allow silence to happen, when I allow something to go wrong, and before I fix it, go and do something else and let that settle. I feel like those are all examples of powerful listening that maybe in part because it's so difficult for me is more powerful, in the same way that maybe someone who is very shy, for them to get up on stage is transformative. Whereas for someone like me to get up on stage is like just a relief. Like, and for me to find spaces where I can be silent, where I can let someone or something else be the speaker or be the text, and I can just be the context. That's where a lot of really, really powerful magic happens. It's a really strange and wonderful paradox and contradiction that I've been feeling into. It might be part of the outgrowth of realizing that I'm just going to be a conflict-riddled person. And if I'm going to be a conflict-riddled person, then I want to approach those conflicts the way like an Obi-Wan Kenobi. Mm-hmm. Or a great samurai, to, not jump in for conflict's sake. Engaging conflict in the wisest way is to just allow the conflict to happen. And within that, to have as much humor and grace as possible while ultimately still, I guess, trying to win, but not with so much attachment on winning now, but actually winning. And actually winning usually means the other person feeling like they've won.
Right.
At least. Yeah.
I was thinking while you were talking, I was thinking about music, because music is an important part of what you're doing, your magic. Huge. And the way you're expressing yourself, and how the beauty of the music is that space between the notes, the way that a magician holds space, it's that space between the notes that's so important, that listening, the subtle.
And the space between the beats.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's where I guess where you become the master, is when you master that space, or like for yourself when you master listening. I never actually knew that I was an introvert until I got older. I actually thought I was extroverted, but I was fooling myself. I'm not really.
Well, do you feel like you really are either or?
Yeah.
Or is it that in some situations you are an extrovert, and in some situations you're an introvert, and in some situations maybe you don't know which one you are? And probably in my experience, those are the ones that really make me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
When I'm in a situation where I don't know. Like, I know there are situations where I am on, and I know there are situations where I am just turned off and focusing inward. Mm-hmm. Not really turned off, but focusing inward. Or just being, really. But then there are situations where I don't know what I'm supposed to be, or I don't know, like maybe where I feel like I feel inspired to be an extrovert, but I don't feel like it's truly welcome. Or places where I feel like I'm an introvert, but people are asking me to step into a different kind of role.
Yeah. Well, for me,
contradiction.
Yeah, the paradox is that I'm a poet, so I'm drawn to putting my poetry out there, to expressing myself, because I know that there's some form of healing or medicine in it. I just intuitively know that. I don't know what it is when I create that, but then when I'm able to share it, I understand it more by what comes back to me after. And then, of course, as I get older and I go back and read them, I'm just pretty surprised at how they manifest as well. The energy or the medicine of these poems that come to me, and they're like a force of their own, like a child that comes through me. So I have this going, and I'm constantly, and I love to sing. Like, that's where I feel the most alive and most joy, is when I'm singing. And all these things, like, put you in the spotlight when you do them. But I don't like that. I want to do these things, but I don't want to be too much in the spotlight, I guess. And I don't know. I mean, I think that might be a side effect of trauma, but I don't know. So I picked the most obscure form of singing I could and became a powwow singer. That way everyone's focused on the dancer while you sing. You know.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. But people notice me anyway because I'm the white lady on the drum that's singing lead and men are following, which is unheard of. Almost unheard of. So I stick out anyway, whether I'm trying to or not.
Well, it might have been unheard of until you announced it on your radio show. Now it has definitely been heard of.
It's heard of now. A white woman lead on I'm not all white, but, you know, that's how I'm perceived because of the color of my skin. I'm Choctaw as well, but I sing Northern because I'm married Northern and adopted Northern, and so yeah, the whole Native singing went underground because Native religion was outlawed in the country where we supposedly have freedom of religion. You know, wasn't legal. Native religion wasn't legal till I was 9 years old. And so that's when it started coming out of the underground. But while it was underground, it got turned into a man's thing because only the men could take the risk of singing publicly and suffering the consequences thereof. Yeah. So I chose the most obscure form, but I also chose the most of a political statement I could make by my obscure form of singing. So there's the juxtaposition again. The paradox.
Well, if it ain't paradox, it ain't interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think, you know, it's hard to figure out if the random. I've made some pretty weird career choices, artistic choices in my life as well. My feeling is if they feel integral to you, if they feel, if I may use the phrase, if they feel indigenous to you,
mm-hmm.
then that's the path you gotta follow as an artist.
Yeah. And I was invited.
Having studied a lot of the people we consider geniuses, historical geniuses, generally they're not people who were in touch with what was going on in their time, except that they were expressing the true nature of what was going on in their time in a way that the people who were around them, for the most part, couldn't understand or were threatened by.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It's like, I'm happy to the degrees that I've been successful in my art, in the world that I live in, and I respect the people I know who have been more successful. And at the same time, you look at the history of great art, and rarely do you find someone who we consider valid 100 years after they were dead, who was truly popular in their time.
Right. Their genius isn't
so
realized.
It's sort of like anyone who's not succeeding in their art right now still has a chip in the game as far as potentially being a genius who's speaking to the ages. Whereas the folks who are making a really good living off of making the art that speaks to this time for the multitudes of these people, great. I wish I was one of them. Personally, I'd rather be a successful artist than be a genius. Genius life sucks. And I'm not saying I am. I'm just saying that that those of us who have not yet, quote, made it are closer to are still have that one qualification for the genius debate, which is generally people don't get you. You know, the truth is 90+% of the people who most people don't get aren't geniuses. We just aren't very good.
Right.
But we don't know. But that's not a determination we get to make.
Right.
Because to me, my art is great. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. And then after it's done, I think it kind of sucks. But that's also something that artists do that I recognize. We feel it's great, and then it's done, and then we're on to the next thing, and we look back on the last thing, and we're like, I don't want to look at it because I'd have to start fixing it.
Right.
But I guess that's if your artistic path has led you to choose the most obscure expression of your art, who knows if down the line that choice in and of itself doesn't elevate it to a place where, when Justin Timberlake is in the dustbin of history, people are talking about singing the ballad of Kira Young. You don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't.
It's like, what did you describe me at first? As mirthful or fanciful, or when you introduced me?
Oh, how did I describe you? A playful soul.
A playful soul. Well, that's me being playful. Because it is like, if language is going to just say this is that and that is this, then why not use it in its truest, most magical potential, to use language to express the possibility that, who knows, maybe right now this is a conversation between two people whose art may be obscure throughout their whole lifetimes, but 100 years or 200 years from now, someone's going to listen to this conversation and say, whoa, they were geniuses.
I don't know. I mean,
I'm sorry. I feel like that was my friend Bodie Doggins, the rock music critic who works for Radio 8 Ball, who just jumped in there.
You're doing voices.
Oh, I never do voices. Sometimes I let myself be inhabited by other people.
Yes, I do as well. But I've always called it doing voices. But yes, I suppose that's what's going on. And, as far as your art, for me, it's always been the most important thing is that it be authentic, that it be real. And when I sing powwow, it feels the same as when I'm doing my poetry and there's something bigger than myself coming through me. And so, that was sort of the litmus test or whatever for myself, is that this feels authentic. And I had no idea that I even had the skill for singing and drumming powwow music until I was almost 30. And I was invited to sit down and sing on a Lakota family drum. And my brother said to me, wow, have you done this before? I was like, no, this is the first time. Whoa. Wow. And singing in a language I'd never spoken before, and catching those songs after one or two times. Can't explain it, but I have to keep doing it because it feels authentic.
Well, that's to me, that's the definition of inspiration. I can't explain it, but I got to keep doing it.
Yeah. I just have to keep doing it. And even if you don't want to, the songs will come to you, and you'll wake up from a dream, and you'll be singing it. They are beings, in and of themselves. They are living beings.
I know.
Yeah.
I do know that. Songs, it's why I write less songs. Like when I was when I was young, like I said, I have no experience in the baby making world other than having been made. But when I was a young songwriter, I was like a guy who just was impregnating the universe every chance I could get, making song after song after song, making and recording hundreds and hundreds of songs, obsessed with that practice. And at some point I found myself like the mother of 1,000 children, that I just can't give every one of them what they need.
Right.
And now I write songs very sparingly. And I write songs only really when either I absolutely have to for myself, or that I absolutely have to for somebody else. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just that we do create, like for me, I have found that I create this potential when I write a song, and if I don't get it, if it doesn't get to that place of potential, and I'm not talking about, it doesn't even necessarily always have to do with anyone hearing it, although that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
But just that the song gets to be in the way that if someone wanted to hear it, it would be heard the way it needs to be heard. And even that can be a struggle and a responsibility, less so in the age of easy digital recording.
Mm-hmm.
But in the time when I came up, because I'm a year older than you, those of you who are listening to the show, you can do the math there. We're not going to do it for you. I came up at a time where to record a song well cost probably $300 to $1,000, and I've never been in a position other than a couple of very lucky months in Hollywood for me, I've never been in a position where I was making the kind of money that I could pay $300 to $1,000 for a guy who could write 5 or 6 songs in a week. That's a lot of money.
It is.
To send my songs to college. And so I've become much more discerning in when I unsheathe that particular sword.
Right.
And it's a different thing. I mean, I think what I respect about what you're talking about is that you found a way to engage the music in a place where you're responsible for yourself in the moment in interaction with sacred music, and you're not responsible for the creation of music that then you have to convince other people to feel as sacred about as you do.
Right. Yeah, and
I as an artist, the grass is always greener. I'm envious of that. Just like I'm envious of any of my musician friends who are jammers. You're a jammer. You get in there and you jam on a song, and it doesn't matter what the song is to a certain respect. If you can drum and you can sing,
right,
you can drum and sing on anything.
And I am jealous of people who can read and write music and things like that, and play like a bunch of different instruments and things. But
have you heard do you know who Ezra Sanzer-Bell is?
I don't.
He's one of the sync book authors. He wrote a book called Astro Music, and he has a podcast on Sync Book Radio called Astro Music. And he developed this thing called the tone color alchemy system, which correlates tones to colors to chakras to astrological symbols. And he wrote about it really extensively. He's one of those people who can read and decode music in the way that maybe that we who are instinctive around music marvel at. It makes him seem like a very powerful magician, which he is. And at the same time, he's like all powerful magicians. He's a guy who has access to knowledge around something that those of us who don't have that access look at it and like, wow, how can you figure all that out? But why I bring it up is because before he started writing about it, his whole idea, his initial inspiration around it was that he could teach people perfect pitch through this system. Because if you can associate a tone with a color and associate that color with a chakra in your body, that by meditating on that tone and that color and that chakra, that people who aren't naturally inclined to have perfect pitch can develop it.
Interesting.
Which I think is a really wonderful and I think the jury's still out, and I think he would probably say this as well, that the jury's still out on whether that's true. It's an experiment that he has been trying, but I think, and I don't know about you, but I feel like intuitively, like, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If I started learning that in kindergarten, I think even if I wasn't a musician, by 5th grade, I'd know music sort of the way that I know grammar.
Right.
Like, I can't explain syntax and grammar to you, but for the most part, I have access to it.
Right. Well, here's the other interesting thing, is that I was taught powwow songs to teach me the Lakota language. So that I could...
Well, of course, yeah. Music is an incredible way to learn language.
So, and that's how I remember it, is that, for instance, I can now translate Lakota in movies and things like that because I can associate each word with a song. And I can, translate it for my own mother.
In movies? So what movies are you talking about?
Movies where they speak Lakota, I call it Shakespeare Lakota, because it's not really how people...
What are movies where they speak Lakota?
Like Dances with Wolves or, movies like that where they're speaking Lakota.
Do they speak Lakota in Thunderheart?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorite movies of all time, by the way.
That is a great movie. Not
just Thunderheart, because I'm totally spacing on the director's name, but he's a great director. He's directed... Michael Apted. And what he did with Thunderheart, he directed the movie Thunderheart, and he directed at the same time a documentary called An Incident at Oglala. And so it's the documentary about what was going on...
Wounded Knee?
At Wounded Knee, thank you, when Leonard Peltier got arrested. And then... So it does the true story, and then it does the fictionalized Hollywood version of that story.
Well, I'll tell you
something. I don't know
they're both the fictionalized Hollywood version. They both are. But go ahead.
Wait, do you think that the documentary Incident at Oglala is also a fictionalized version?
Yes, it is.
I'm not arguing. I'm really.
Yes, it absolutely is.
Can you? So because now I'm engaged in a way now that I have not been engaged. So I feel like I'm about to get some information that I haven't had before. But to set it up for the audience that hasn't watched, Thunderheart is a movie starring Val Kilmer that you can go watch. That is based upon the themes that are expressed in the documentary Incident at Oglala, which is Michael Apted's documentary about the siege at Wounded Knee that led to Leonard Peltier being arrested for the murder of some FBI officers who many people think were killed by friendly fire from other FBI officers. And there's just if you learn about that time at Wounded Knee, it's mind blowing the level of fucked upness that was going on. And now, having set that up, and probably been wrong about part of it, can you tell me how Incident at Oglala is as sort of phony
because
as Thunderheart, which is sort of a fantasy.
Right, because like AIM is referred to as arm and things like that. Like they're,
Right.
It contains elements of the truth, but the overall narrative also contains many lies. And one of them being that, Peltier's innocent, which is, he probably, he didn't get a fair trial. A lot of people don't get fair trials, but he did brag to Annie Mae Pictou Akwash and Dennis Banks' wife at the time, Kamuk Nichols Banks, or Kamuk Banks Nichols, about shooting at least one of the agents, and that is at this point believed to be one of the reasons why she was murdered. And they lied about AIM leadership, lied about who murdered her as well, because it was AIM that murdered her, because she knew Peltier was guilty, because he bragged to her, and interrogated her, shoved a gun in her mouth. And so the teacher character in the movie Thunderheart is based on the Annie Mae character, Annie Mae Pictou Akwash.
Yeah.
And she was murdered by her own AIM brothers, and there's 2 of them in jail for it. And it took her family decades to get them into jail. And so now...
Wait, but I'm confused, but isn't that... I haven't seen Thunderheart in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I know I said it was one of my favorite films.
It's a great movie.
But I'm trying to remember how her death is... What I love about that film is that it touches on all these, quote, realities. You're shedding a new light on these realities for me. But at least throughout a big part of the film, the FBI agent who turns out to be a Native American, who's having visions that are making him get in touch with his original heritage.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks that it's other tribal members who killed her. But at the end,
it's actually his partner,
and
his
this
FBI
is
partner.
It's one of those things that when I think of one of the things I talk about in my piece, We're All a Bunch of Jews, is the idea that that in Western art we keep coming across these Christ figures. So and we love these movies and these stories, and they keep having these Christ figures that show up. And in that sense, we're all Christians, and Christians are all a kind of Jew, since they're worshiping a Jew, and it comes out of the Abrahamic religions. And so, and I think of her as being another one of these characters like that, and her story is fraught with the same idea. It's the idea that if she was killed by other Native Americans, then just like the Jews killed Jesus, the Native Americans killed Annie Mae. And at the same time, when you're under an oppressive regime that is well-funded, like the Romans or the FBI, the American FBI, you can get individual members of a constituency to do some fucked up shit to other members of that same constituency.
But they didn't do it. It was actually the AIM leadership.
You believe that it was really just, it was a full inside job. Because I think that's what I'm remembering. That's what Thunderheart
But yes, it was a full inside job. But at the same time, we're getting into what my blog is about. Everything that's fucked up in the world is fucked up because psychopaths are in charge, right? So, the lords of perception that, control our perceptions through the media, we have a small reflection or a little version of that in Indian country. In an Indian country, the lords of perception are AIM. They are supposed to be perceived as the liberators, not feeling free. Not free yet. And they are supposed to be perceived as the carriers of tradition. But what they really are is the infectors of tradition because they carry with them the infection of the psychopaths in charge. So they're doing the bidding of the psychopaths in charge. So my personal theory about it is that the actual AIM leadership was picked by the psychopaths in charge, that it was co-opted from the very beginning. And so...
So wait, okay, so... Well, now we're getting into, like... now I'm really curious. I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
This is the kind of question that gets me in trouble all the time. It might get me in trouble right now. I just want to preface it right now that way. But, so, the elephant in the room is named John Trudell,
right,
who is in the movie Thunderheart, was a member of AIM, and a guy whose family was killed in a bombing, right? And he's a very powerful and moving speaker. And I'll just, in the interest of full disclosure, he's a guy who I've known and who I've had as a guest on Radio 8 Ball, and someone I have tremendous respect for. And at the same time, I'm open to. But when you say that, when all of this leads me to a question, are you saying that John Trudell is suspect?
No, I'm not. I'm actually, because if it wasn't for John Trudell's testimony, at John Graham's trial and at Looking Cloud's trial, if it wasn't for his testimony, they wouldn't be behind bars. So no, he's not suspect in that sense. No, not at all. And what he testified to in those trials was that when they found Annie Mae's body, before they had identified her, and before they had found the bullet in the back of her head, which they didn't find until the second autopsy, John Trudell was sitting in a car with Dennis Banks, and Dennis Banks said to him, the body they found is Annie Mae, and there's a bullet in the back of her head. We can all go and read these court testimonies and figure this out ourselves. But one of my friends is Annie Mae's daughter, Denise Pictou Maloney, and she's had to fight her whole life for the truth. And, she does not blame John Trudell either. But she does hold Russell Means and Dennis Banks and a bunch of other people responsible. And she has to sit back and watch these people, be heralded as the liberators of Indian country when she went to them and said, tell me the truth, and they told her lies. And when the lies finally came to the surface, and John Graham was finally put in jail for killing her mother while she prayed for her, Russell Means said to her, well, yeah, I know who ordered the murder, but I can't tell you because of a blood oath. But you can't say anything bad about him because he's dead, And, what about his children? There's all this stuff. And so her family has to, be silenced in the face of this decades-old lie of, Leonard Peltier is innocent and a thug has been made over into a political prisoner for the sake of who? Not Leonard Peltier, because he's still in jail, right? But for the psychopaths in charge. He's a cash cow for the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee. They wouldn't be making money unless he was in jail. So for anyone to think that they're actually out to get him out of jail, look again. Go to one of their fundraisers and see if they're really trying to get him out.
I'll tell you. So now we're getting to the true and difficult sync here.
Yeah.
And this it's painful, and it's the thing I've been learning over and over again, but I've been learning very deeply the last month or so in Olympia. And it's the same thing. Olympia, I choose to live in Olympia because, first of all, because I grew up here, and because I love it, but also because I think it is on the very cutting edge of the sexual revolution, and has been since I was a kid. The things that America is figuring out in the last, 15 seconds as far as gender equality and gender neutrality and, acceptance of difference has been the way, is the world I grew up in. That was the way it was here 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. Not entirely, but on the street and in reality it was. Mm-hmm. And yet, the liberators here are also thugs. Maybe not with guns, but and this is the experience. And I have to say to me that's the lesson I've been having I'm learning is what if the people who are your allies that you agree with, that you are fighting alongside, are insist on seeing you as an enemy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't want to, maybe you can explain the term mansplain to me, but I don't want to mansplain native issues to you and say, well, I can relate because of this other oppression that's happening over here, because I get that all oppression patterns happen differently, and what you're talking about involves jail and guns and death.
Yeah, murder.
And what I'm talking about deals with people with jobs and reputations and egos. So it's not equivalent. And at the same time, on the sync level, that's something. This conversation, when it was focused on me, was only partially interesting. Maybe you and the listeners will hear it in my voice, that when we started talking about this stuff, I got very interested and very engaged because I'm interested. I'm interested and inspired on multiple levels that I can't explain, and one of them is something that you're hitting on that is very true for me in this moment, is trying to figure out how to be allies with people who are my allies who aren't my allies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when your liberators are also your thugs who can, this goes back to the conversation that started all of this, which is supposedly, as a Jew, I'm supposed to be in alignment with Israel, even though Israel is run by thugs.
Right.
Like a brutal South American drug dictatorship.
Right.
And at the same time, if you were a Nicaraguan and people just were like, all the Nicaraguans are fucking Nazis, or they're all cocaine lords, you'd be like, no, me and most of us are not. We're just like people like you, mm-hmm. and we don't get a say. And just because 25 thugs run that nation, I'm not going to let you run down that whole nation. And I'm also not going to be a representative of that nation because it's run by a bunch of fucking thugs.
Right. Just like America.
And it's annoying that it's the same way with AIM, but and on the same level, I'm not surprised that AIM is like the Black Panthers, is like the PLO, is like the Israeli, is like the Mossad, is like the CIA, mm-hmm. is like the Hells Angels. It's like any group of thugs who are running the shit.
Right.
And it's,
Mm-hmm. And anything that goes on in India.
I'll tell you, I am a kid who grew up revering Russell Means.
Yeah.
With Leonard Peltier, and this is the first critical conversation of those names that I would accept, honestly, mm-hmm. that I've had that I would accept, because, I usually would assume that the people who are trashing, I'm not saying you're trashing, who are criticizing them are racist, deniers of Holocaust.
Right.
I'm not interested in people who are racist deniers of Holocaust.
Right.
But I don't think that's what you're saying. I think what you're saying is that there's another question, which is, why do our liberators have to be thugs?
Yeah, that's the bigger question. And I mean, the answer I've come up with so far, and I'm not going to say it's the definitive answer, but is that we have to be our own liberators, because that's our only key to really true freedom, is liberating yourself. As long as somebody else is your liberator, I guess it always has to be done by force.
Well, that's the game. That's the sync game again. If we can liberate the mind enough, who knows what we can do? I know it's utopian again. Playful, fanciful. I love that you introduced me as a playful person. There are a lot of people who not say that. So thank you. That's really very sweet.
You're welcome.
I'm also aware of time.
Yes.
How long are we?
We're out of time.
I feel like we've gone over the.
I wanted to finish that thought because it was important. What we were talking about, and you were very engaged.
Oh yes.
But
yes,
very.
And I have to say, I am so. Of all of this, I know you had to disillusion me a little bit in this conversation, and I appreciate it. And at the same time, and I'm someone who disillusions a lot of people, and I hope they appreciate it as much. I will also say I'm so grateful that you and I can both agree that John Trudell is the shit.
Yes.
Because he's one of my favorite artists, one of my favorite. I don't want to say one of my favorite people, because a lot of times when we've hung out, he's been kind of a grumpy Gus, but, I don't blame him for that. He's always been a real gentleman, and his art, when he really lets fly, and what he does as a performer in Thunderheart, and of course what he's done as an historical figure is really great, and I'm just happy to know that, at least in your experience of it, and in your telling of it, I got to retain my illusions about John Trudell, that he is the shit.
And
I encourage people who don't know who he is, to get nothing out of this conversation, go look up some John Trudell. Because if you think Terrence McKenna's the shit, John Trudell is kind of like, I think I think of them as kindreds in terms of the ability to do something with their speaking on radio, just their speaking voice, speaking to people, whether it's through their poetry or just speaking, that it is a psychedelic experience, just listening to them talk. And So I hope we got somewhere close to that, at least for 15 minutes of this 2-hour talk.
I think we got somewhere for sure. And I would definitely love to have you back. You've been a delightful guest.
Well, thanks. Yeah. You've been a delightful host. You really are a powerful listener, and I do think that's the greatest art that synchronicity is going to teach us. So thanks for being great at it.
Thank you, and we will talk soon. And thank you, listeners.
Okay, well, and all your listeners, please go to radio8ball.com, get a question answered. It's free. I don't track the questions. You can share them if you want. And, there's my version of something sacred over there that, for the most part, is entirely free. So.
And it's fun.
Have that.
And it's fun. Thank you again.
You might get Christmas cunnilingus.
You might. The magic is out there in the universe now. It could happen. We'll talk soon. Thank you again.
Thank you.